Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about developing from scratch. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how long does it typically take you to develop a software product from scratch? Well, if you talk about me personally, that's going to be a bit of a different estimate, and of course, what are we making? Are we making a Hello World application? Are we making the next Facebook? Are we making, what are we making? That is the thing that dictates it. It's sort of like asking a carpenter or a builder, how long is it going to take you to build a house? His or her first question is probably going to be how many square meters or square feet, how many stories, blah, 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 where is it, and so forth and so forth. My questions will be very, very similar. It's the same deal. However, if we are going to talk about something that might be more useful to you to figure out, the time it takes to build an application very much depends on the people involved usually. And in other words, you will find that if you have the right people, things are usually very fast. If you have the wrong people, it can drag for a very, very, very long time. I'll give you concrete examples, and I hope that you take this with a pinch of salt, because I'm in no way trying to say that, I'm God's gift to programming or anything like that. I'm just going to give you some references about how it is to work in my part of my company and what usually the differences can be. So to give you a bit of context, in my specific role that I have right now, I am the highest ranked software engineer. My title is Senior Principal Software Engineer. Now, that for those of you who have been doing quite a lot of work over the years, it doesn't really mean much, because we all know that even though if you're the CTO, you're like the super ultra programmer 3000, it doesn't really mean anything, because after senior level software developer, what it starts being more about leadership and these sorts of responsibility. The difference, however, within my specific organization is that since I have that role, I set the hiring policy for all the roles that we have, including my own, which means that in our specific organization, the higher up you go, the rule is the more competent you have to be. In other words, at my level, or at the regular principal level and so forth, you are expected to be able to code at the level where you can support other seniors, juniors, middlers, doesn't matter, right? You don't get that role just because you have a lot of years in the industry. Now, to showcase and give you an example of how much of a difference it can make, I'll tell you a little story. So about a year ago, I started working with a new project that, basically the idea is in our specific organization that when we start a new project, in order for us to make sure that the project is set up well for success and that we can hire people from various backgrounds, because we don't want to just do the thing that a lot of companies do, and that is just hire a bunch of random people, put them on a project, and then cross our fingers that it's going to work. What we do is that we use our most talented software developers, the higher levels, and we ask them, can you be on this project for a few months, work with the team, coach them, set things up in accordance with our recommendations, and so forth and so forth. I, of course, do that as well as my other coworkers who work with me do. And so basically what happens is that we learn that this project has had a bit of a researching period with the current software developer who's been working there. He or she has been working for about 15 years of experience, something like that. So it's about the same level, same range that I have on my CV. And so when we get to the project, when we start it up, we realize, I understand that they have had a prepping session. So this person has been working with the product team for a whole year. And in that time, they haven't produced any usable code at the very least. So I ask, okay, so why is it that, why do we decide to build now since you've already had this person committed for a year? And it turns out that due to the dynamics between them and the product owner, they've basically just done what they call research. And so I asked them, what research have you been doing? And they're a little bit vague on the details, and so I kind of let that slide for the moment. And then we start staffing up with some people, and then we figure out the details of what this system is supposed to be doing. Now, this system is pretty much a basic CRUD application with one specific feature requirement, which is a MATLAB integration, which is going to crunch a model that is going to crunch a bunch of numbers for us. Otherwise, it's a complete CRUD application. We're talking 4 pages, like UI pages with with corresponding endpoints in the backend. That's it. It has taken them a year to research how to build this thing. Within the first day, I think, I had mocked up most of the front end, most of the back end, like we haven't implemented and so forth, with the basic database and system requirements and all of that good stuff, right? And then after I worked with the team for about 2 weeks, because we get in a new tech lead who is supposed to take over, because of course my job isn't to lead this team, it is just to help them set up in the situation. It could have been one of my coworkers as well. And then I leave the team, and I think a whole year later, it's a year later when I get invited to the their first production release party, or fika as we call it here in Sweden. And it turns out that with that team, it took them a year to get that thing to a production environment. Now, I cannot tell you exactly how it came to be that it took that long to do basically that, but I do know that the tech lead came to me and this is a senior software developer, guys, with 12-ish years of experience, who has never set up, like in this case, they had to run it on a virtual machine with an Nginx server, so forth and so forth. So even though it's a very simple, quote-unquote, product in terms of functionality, due to the team involved, it took a lot longer than maybe I would have expected, and probably what the customers would have expected. Now, let's go to the product that I have right now. The product I have right now is probably one of the bigger projects that I've been working on, and it is a project where right now, and this is after me working on it for a month or two, I think, so forth, it has over 450 endpoints. And it has tons and tons of pages. We have externals, like an external portal, we have an internal portal with shared database. We have the highest security requirements that I can imagine for any military or banking or medical industry type of thing, right? So it's a pretty decent sized project. It took us, I think, with the current team, it took the current team about 2 months, like on the job. They're still trying to do it, like to get that into a test environment, but we're using Terraform and so forth and so forth. So in our scenario, getting a test environment is basically the same thing as getting a production environment. And so the time difference there, hopefully they will ship it very soon, is like we were talking about months and months and months of a difference. And then we can take the actual implementation time. So I have software developers that I work with who have more years than experience that I do, and we did a review not that long ago about the differences between our various profiles. So we have a bunch of so-called mid-level software developers who joined the project after some of our more experienced so-called senior developers had joined, and it turns out that the amount of time that they spent on the project was about 2 months. And the new hires that we had spent about, say, 3 weeks. And in that time period, the new hires shipped 3 times as much code as the seniors who had been working for 2 months. So how long it takes to ship a project has so many factors into it that it's almost impossible to say how long it's going to take. The only thing you can sort of do, which is the thing that I did when I was talking to my stakeholders, is that I'm trying to roughball a range of how long it takes an average software developer to deliver a feature or a story on a project, not based on my own experiences working for myself, because again, it has to be based on what I see on average. On average, it takes any story 1 to 2 weeks or 1 to 4 weeks, depending on who's going to do it. That's the estimate that I usually give to my stakeholders, and they always say the same thing. Why can't you make it more narrow than that? Why is it the error margin so big? And I go, it's very easy, because if you have someone who's really, really good, they're going to be able to ship in a fraction of the time it takes someone who has more years of experience but isn't really all that good. And if the feature that they are going to work on, the specific thing they're going to build, is an advanced thing or an easy thing, that's also going to impact the estimate. And that is, sadly enough, the closest at least I can give you in terms of how long it takes to ship the product or anything like that. So what I want you to take away from this is that it's very, very hard to say how long it takes to ship an average, project or so within web, because again, it depends on who's going to do the work, how big is the thing that you're going to build. I mean, in a simplest scenario, it can take a few minutes. And in a worst case scenarios, it can take years. As you say, I heard in my little story, even though the system itself is probably a pretty simple system, it took the specific team in question a year to do the thing necessary in order to get it into the hands of any users. For another team with even a bigger system, but they have different people who may or think in a different way or have different skills and so forth and so forth, it just took a few months. And then even on a story level, it can differ vastly depending on who's going to do the work. As you can imagine, it can be an easy thing, like if you take a junior software developer versus a senior, odds are that they are going to ship in different time. Or one is going to be faster than the other. But as I was explaining to you guys, even if they have the title senior, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're any good. It just means that they have been doing work for quite some time. So even that is a difficult thing to estimate, and that is why it's so frustrating for a lot of product owners to get a good estimate, or get estimates from software developers, because each of us is different, and every task is different most of the time. And not everything is completely different, but usually it's nuanced enough that for one person it's 3 days to do something, for another person it's 2 weeks, and that is the nature of our craft, and that is why it's so hard to, especially in my situation, where they want me to estimate work months ahead so that they can figure out how much it's going to cost, where I only have myself and I go, oh yeah, this is just a month, or this is just 2 weeks or something like that, and then I put it in the hands of somebody else who's going to do the work. I have to account for that, of course, and then my estimate is off by 3 times. And that's something we always, and you should as well, communicate to your stakeholders. Always communicate that unless you are doing the work yourself, it's kind of hard to estimate how long it's going to take somebody else to do it, because it completely depends on the person who's going to pick up the work. Have a great day.